Mortuary Files is presented in a question and answer format, featuring a retired licensed funeral director. This program explores the funeral service profession in depth, including funeral home practices, procedures, customer experiences, as well as real-world stories involving the families they serve. Some topics may be sensitive and may involve in-depth discussions of death, grief, and loss. Viewer discretion is advised.
And now, here are your hosts of Mortuary Files, Rick and Randy.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Mortuary Files. I'm Rick. I was a licensed funeral director for 35 years, also was an embalmer and a crematory operator. And this fellow over here is my brother, Randy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Randy. And last time we met, I said, my mother, what did I say? My mother liked me best?
I said mom liked me best, and you said you didn't think so.
Yeah, and we both lied.
We both lied.
Because without a doubt, mom loved Derry best.
We were not the favorite. He was.
Yep. He definitely was. All right, everybody. So
God rest his soul. He's not with us anymore, but
he's not with us anymore. Well, you know, I was thinking about that the other day. It's been 11 years, I think.
Yeah.
So last time we met, Dick was given a story about his first time as a funeral director, the first time that he actually ran the whole funeral himself. Mm-hmm. And he ended up getting in a little bit of hot water. And I gave a little bit of teaser on it. But I think, to be fair to everyone, Rick, we should really redo it. We should really redo it starting from the beginning, because this will be a feature later on. The first few 3-4 times that we do this, it's going to be everyone can see Rick's Oddities. And then after that, it's going to be strictly on Patreon.
Well, before these were called Rick's Oddities, by the way, I was writing a booklet called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to a Funeral. And I had gotten about 12 stories started. And since then, it evolved into a lot more than 12 stories. Wow. And so we decided to do this format instead of me finishing that and publishing that. But I think this will go out to a whole lot more people than that would have. So
yeah,
we changed the name of it. But if I'm going to tell a story, one of Rick's out of these stories, I got to have my hat on. That's my funeral director hat. No, I've never actually worn this hat on a funeral, but it kind of looks like a funeral director hat, don't it?
All right. Well, why don't you? I'm not going to tell you what it looks like. So you look like
Lincoln, that for Abraham Lincoln. I don't know.
You look like that old creepy guy in the westerns. That
I'm supposed to do this too.
The old creepy guy in the westerns that everybody rides by on the horses and looks over at him. That's what you look like. All right, Rick, go ahead and tell us the story.
Now it's your turn to hear Rick's Oddities.
Okay, like Randy was saying, the very first funeral that I was ever in charge of after I got my license, I was scared to death. My knees were knocking when I was talking to this family. And then I asked them a question, and there was some argument between the family. So why don't you just let Mr. Davis, ask us his questions? He's the expert here. And that's when I realized that they looked at me as an expert, even though this was my very first funeral. And so I knew they didn't know what I was going to ask, what I was going to do. But that funeral went great. Everything was good. The funeral went fine. The family was happy. And we all went outside. We got in our cars. We had about 40 cars that were going to be part of the procession that were going to follow us to the cemetery. And the cemetery was about 5 miles away. And we had a police escort. And we left the funeral home, heading for the cemetery. Everything was fine. Until we got about 1 mile away from the cemetery. I'm going up a hill, and there's it's kind of a rolling, hilly sort of a county, north of Atlanta. And I got within a mile, and I saw a red light come up on the dashboard. And all of a sudden, my heart started beating pretty fast because I knew what that light meant. It meant my alternator was dying. Sure enough, about 10 seconds later, that hearse was 100% dead. It pulled over. Well, it didn't pull over. I pulled it over to the side of the road. And sure enough, 40 cars in my procession pulled over right behind me. I had cleared a major intersection, the biggest intersection actually in that county. And I wasn't thinking about it. I didn't have a choice really, but those 40 cars did not clear the intersection. So my procession, my very first procession, was blocking the largest intersection in our county with thousands of cars traveling by there every 5 minutes. And I was scared to death, but I knew exactly what to do. I got my cell phone out. I called the funeral home, told them what happened. They said, we'll send another hearse, just stay right there. And I went out and I talked to the family, told them what happened. The police had just kept on going. I didn't know if he even knew we were born behind him, but he just kept driving away. So I called the police department and asked them to ask that officer to come back and get us again. And I called the cemetery, asked them to meet the officer out front. He was going to bring the family. Long story short, the police then escorted the family the rest of the way to the cemetery. The cemetery took it from there, took the family to the grave, and they just waited. And it took me about 15 minutes to get there. When the other hearse pulled up, there was one driver in that hearse, and it was me. So two of us got out. We opened both of our doors, both hearses, and we grabbed hold of the side of the caskets. And you want to talk about some rubberneckers? We're taking a casket out of my hearse in the middle of this huge, busy intersection, and kind of just skipping it along over to the other hearse. And people are going, "What?" No, you could see them turning their heads. It was hilarious. But anyway, I got in that hearse, and he stayed with the one that was broke down. I went out of the cemetery, pulled up to where the family was. I got out. I opened the doors. I'm wishing for the pallbearers to come over to take the casket over to the grave, and they did. And I nodded to the preacher. Preacher stood up, began to give his sermon. He got about 3 words out, and the son stood up. So, wait just a minute. We cannot just pretend that nothing ever happened here. He says, "This is all Mom's doing. You all know it is. Mom always said she was going to be late to her own funeral, and damned if she wasn't." So he just totally bailed me right out. It was fantastic, but I was scared to death.
And they treated you good after that, though.
They did. Wrote a good review, and all that stuff, and said nice things. And he even told me, he told the people, he says, "Car's mechanical. There's no way that he could know that was going to break down, or he probably wouldn't have gotten in it." And he was right. But he was a good guy, and I appreciated them handling it that way, because some people would have just blown up and ate me for lunch, but he did not do that.
So with Mortuary Files, what we do, this podcast, webcast, whatever you want to call it, is basically a question and answer format. Rick, you already know this. The viewers ask the questions. We will respond to them. You will respond to them as a funeral director. I think you can take your hat off now.
Yeah, story time's over.
Whoa, block that light.
Yeah, well,
I got the hair and the looks.
I got the money, so we're even.
I'd rather have the hair and the looks. So they'll ask us the questions, and when they ask us the questions, we're going to answer them honestly and truthfully, and we're going to say we need to do a little disclaimer here, and these are our views.
Yeah, they're just our views. We're not giving out any legal advice. We're telling from my experience what the laws are where I worked, and they're not all the same everywhere. They're different in different states, counties, whatever.
What happened in Michigan isn't what can happen in Georgia. There's some unique differences between the two states, and what you can do there, you can't do here. What you can do here, you might not be able to do there. So with that, any viewers out there who have any questions, they can write us.
You bet.
And send us an email at do you remember the email address yet?
Yeah, mortuaryfiles@gmail.com. And what's the other one?
mortuaryfiles@yahoo.com. Just in case one doesn't go through or one messes up, we've got a secondary.
Now, is it just Mortuary Files? Is there an underscore or anything?
No, just Mortuary Files. Just
Okay.
one word, mortuaryfiles@gmail.com.
Okay.
No underscore. If you see an underscore, it's only because that the systems, if you're on YouTube or Patreon, because we're on YouTube, we're on Patreon, we're on Spotify, we're on Rumble, and I think that's it. And we'll put it on other stuff if we can. I thought about X and Instagram, but I'm not a big X and Instagrammer, so maybe later on we'll work on that. We'll try to get on as many platforms as we can. Spotify, it's audio. On Patreon, it's audio and video. And soon we're going to be setting up Patreon tiers for support. So we want to tell everyone, if you like this comment, please give it a thumbs up. Please comment. And what's the other one?
Subscribe. Subscribe, and comment.
Subscribe. This is our second. This will be episode number 2. And we've already got, Rick, our first question from
Oh,
a
excellent.
brand new subscriber.
Before we ask the next question, I just want to remind everybody that this is the first time Randy and I have ever tried this. We both, as you can tell, kind of have the gift of gab, but we've never, we don't have any other channels. I've never done this before.
I do.
Well, he has. So if I make a mistake and if you ask a question and I don't, maybe I didn't understand it or I answer it wrong, just ask again and clarify it or change your wording or something, and I'll try to answer it the way you want it answered.
Yeah, sometimes we get talking and we get sidetracked, and we forget the original question. But and that's where the viewers can come in. They can come in and they can say, "Hey, could you explain more about this? You didn't really explain it really well, because what you explain and think you're explaining it well may not be for the layman." And that's why I'm here. If I don't understand it, because I don't understand a lot of this stuff and I don't understand it, then I'm going to come in with questions for you. So with that, we'll get to our number one question if you're ready, Rick. What are the common mistakes that families make when planning funerals that really could be avoided?
Well, probably the biggest mistake families make is there's several, but one of the bigger ones is they don't talk about it at all before they get to the funeral home. They don't have any communication between each other. They don't know who's going to talk, who's being charged, or they don't know what finances they have. They don't know if they have insurance or not. They don't know what dad had. They don't know what his wishes were. A lot of people refuse to talk about this subject. It's taboo for a lot of families to even talk about this.
Yeah, and I have that here in my family.
Yeah, and if it, especially if I had a family this actually happened. Grandpa was 95 years old, and he'd had 2 or 3 surgeries. He had an amputation. He couldn't walk anymore. He had emphysema. I mean, he had a list of problems, and then he died, and they were totally shocked. He was 95 and had a whole bunch of medical issues, and they were shocked, and they'd never discussed what Grandpa's wishes were or anything else. And so that's the first thing: is communication about, tell your folks what you want to have done. Some people don't want to be cremated, absolutely don't want to be. Well, if you don't want to be, then you have to have finances for a funeral, and that's a lot more expensive than a cremation. The second thing I would say would be, don't air all your family's dirty laundry in the middle of this conference when you come in. It's like all the problems of the family come out during these arrangement conferences that we have. You have 4 or 5 children, and you have a wife that's technically in charge, and she wants one thing, the daughter wants something else, and then they get in the bickering contest. Well, I was there with him when he died. I was holding his hand when he died. And the other one said, well, I was his favorite. Well, I was the oldest. And it's this little pissing contests that people have. That's for later at your house. Don't that the funeral home is not the place to go through all that. So the communication again would solve some of that too. And the other thing would be, without talking about it, not preparing for it financially. Funeral's an expensive thing today. It's a lot of money today, especially a traditional funeral. And so if you just don't think about how it's going to get, if you don't ever buy insurance, ever buy a cemetery plot, ever say where you want to be buried, if you weren't in the military and you don't know that you want to go to a national cemetery because you can do that for free, then it's just people are lost. They don't know what the answers are that I'm asking.
National cemeteries would be for veterans, not just everybody.
For veterans, yeah. If you're a veteran,
veterans and some family members.
There are VA cemeteries and national cemeteries that you qualify if you had an honorable discharge, and it's free.
Yeah. I know in a veteran cemetery, the wife.
No, that's just the burial that's free, not the
the burial, just the burial.
For the funeral home.
Yeah,
yep.
just the burial, just to be put into the ground. And I know it's you can have your wife buried with you. There's certain cemeteries have certain restrictions. Some allow side by side. Some have to be on top of each other.
That's right.
And I know that some children under a certain age can be buried. If you have an adult child, no. And if you
a child with a disability qualifies.
What about and then we'll get back to preparing. What about a guy, for me, for instance, I want to be buried in a national cemetery.
Mhm.
I prefer it where it's warm because I don't want to be cold the
Yeah.
rest of eternity. I was married to my first wife for 5 or 6 years, married to my second wife for 10 years. And then, of course, now I've been married for 40 years, or 37 years. So obviously, Lori will be buried with me. Um, I'll be cremated. So we put into a niche together. But what about my ex-wives? Do you know?
Yeah, they're not entitled.
Once I got married, they don't
Get
get
one.
nothing. Get one. Okay. All right. Now, I remember years and years ago that we talked. And I said to you, I said, what was when family members came in and you talked to them? Because you got family members that work together, you got
Yeah.
family members that just don't care, and you
Mhm.
got family members, as you just mentioned, that all you do is argue.
Mhm.
What is the number one thing that family members argue about? I know what you told me. I wonder if it's going to still be the same thing because you said by far this was the number one thing that families argue. So they're sitting in front of you, and you got the stuff that you're going to be doing, and all of a sudden they start arguing. What's usually number one?
Well, there are two that are, maybe I told you one of them. There's two side by side. The biggest thing is either money or possessions. Dad said I get that. Dad said I get this. Or they're like dividing up his stuff in front of me, like, I want that. I says, okay, you can do that later. Um, but because of the money, there is only one person that's in charge, and that one person is the next of kin. Now, if for some reason the next of kin can't afford to pay for the funeral, then they can give that right to a child and let the child decide, hey, you leave that up to you. And so money and who's in charge are the biggest two things. Yep.
Well, you mentioned to me this. It wasn't one of those two. You mentioned to me writing their obituary. And it struck a chord to me because when I was long divorced from my second
Mhm.
wife, but her father died. And she, at the time, was living with an individual,
Mhm.
and she wanted the individual named in the obituary because she considered that she was married to him,
Mhm. But she wasn't. Mhm.
and she wasn't. And the rest of the family said, absolutely not.
Right.
And I'm gonna tell you one, it was a knockdown. Now I was not there, but it was a pretty knockdown, and it was a physical knockdown, drag out fight. Now this was not done at the funeral home. This was
Mhm.
at the home at their house, and to where one of their uncles literally had to intervene between two people.
Oh yeah, I've broken up fights. I've had to call the police on families. And that ticks people off. Sometimes it gets put in an obituary, but a lot of times families aren't clear. They'll come in and they'll tell you the name of a granddaughter, and they'll say her name is Cheyenne. Well, okay, unless they spell it different than normal, I'm going to write Cheyenne, like Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Right, right.
But then I always let the family preview the obituary before we publish it. I want you to look at it, read at it, make sure everything's spelled right. And they read it, didn't say anything. Next day it showed up in the paper, and they said, I called up and they said, the granddaughter's name is spelled wrong. I said, which one? She goes, Cheyenne. I says, Cheyene. She goes, no, that's not how she spells it. It's it's Shyanne, Cheyenne. And I'm serious. They blasted me for not knowing that that was her name.
Yeah,
That's
not
an
not
unusual
realizing.
spelling. That would require that I could have used that information. You should have told me it's spelled uniquely, and they didn't. But they blame me, of course.
And do you find that when I mean you said I mean you get all realm of people who come in.
Oh yeah, most families are sweet and they're just sad and it's one of the worst days of their life. It's just these are the ones you remember. The families
Yeah.
don't want to take it out on you. Somehow it's my fault that all this happened.
It's always kind of strange when families come in there and they kind of act a fool sometimes, don't they?
They do. Yes, certain families do.
We'll move on to our second question now. As I said at the beginning of the show, Rick, is that we got our first question. Our
Excellent,
first question comes
excellent.
from Jay, and Jay wants to know, can you explain how cremation works? Now, I'm going to assume She wants to know from top to bottom, A to Z. You get a loved one's body, you go to pick it up. Well, let's start with there. Somebody gets a hold of you and says, my relative died, my father died, my wife died, whatever. We want cremation, but we don't
Sure.
know anything about it. So let's go from the time that you
Okay.
get the call.
Well, I'm going to answer it two different ways because I think I understand what her question is, but one of these two answers should answer it the way that she's asking, or this person's asking. I'm assuming she, but maybe not. Everything up until the family arrangement time is exactly the same. The phone call comes in, the directors go to the place of death, the hospital or the home or the nursing home, wherever it is, brings them back to our funeral home. And then if we know ahead of time, person is being cremated, they would be placed temporarily in refrigeration. Until the time that the family comes in, we sit down, make all the arrangements. There's quite a few forms you have to sign. We fill them out for you, and you just sign them, giving permission. For cremation, we ask questions like, do they have a pacemaker? Because if they do, we need permission to remove that. You can't leave pacemakers and defibrillators inside someone's body that's going to be cremated. Those have to be surgically removed. And then from that point, once all the paperwork's signed, of course, payment usually happens at that time too, then that person is simply taken to a crematory. And if a crematory is on site, that's just done right there. It's usually either in the garage or behind a separate building behind the funeral home. And if they don't have their own crematory, and most funeral homes do not have their own crematory, then there are crematories that other people can use. They just charge a fee for it. We pay them, and we would deliver them to that crematory, and we'd probably go back the next day to pick up those cremains. And that's what they're called by the remains are called cremains after they're cremated. And they would give those back to us in a temporary plastic urn. And then we bring that back to the funeral home, call the family, let them know the cremains are ready to be picked up. And then once they come in, they may have selected an urn. You don't have to. You can use just depends on what your final wishes are. That's all you have to do. Cremation is considered final disposition. You don't have to bury, you don't have to put them on a piano, you don't have to, but you do, you do have to pick them up. If you don't, they go into storage at our funeral home, and we've had some people's cremains for 30 years at the funeral home that family just refuses to pick them up. I think they've started the program because we got way too many than we should have. They started making them fill out a form that if they're not picked up within X number of days, that we're going to mail them to a specific address, which is the next of kin's address. And we'll do return receipt requested postal delivery to them because we really don't want to take responsibility for those forever. That's not our job.
So, what I think,
Unless they refuse to sign for them, then they'd be
yeah,
returned to us.
what I think, what I took Jane's questions to be was, tell me the process. Tell me what
Yeah.
happens.
Okay. That's
Tell me what
okay.
happens.
So
Yeah, tell me
that
what
was the
happens to the
first.
body.
That was the first one. The second answer is the actual cremation process itself.
Yeah.
And I actually owned a crematory for a little while, and I was a certified crematory operator for years and years. The person's body, you do not have to purchase a casket to be cremated. However, they have to be placed in something to be handled. You can't just, even a sheet doesn't work. It's not rigid enough to handle the body properly with enough respect. And, bodies are limber and that sort of thing. So you need something to kind of keep their arms together and that sort of thing. And for lack of a better description, normally if it's just a cremation without a viewing and that sort of thing, then they'd be placed in a heavy duty cardboard container that
And
looks just like a casket. It's the size of a casket, but it's just cardboard and it's combustible. And that would be placed into the cremation chamber in that container.
and that's what our brother was in when I went to his cremation.
Okay.
When they done it, Derry was in for lack of a better word, a very heavy duty cardboard box.
That's it. That's all it is. And then the whole process, people think the crematory is the for lack of a better word, it's not called an oven, but a lot of people call it an oven. It's called a retort. and they're placed in this retort, and there are a bunch of dials and things on there, and you turn it up to a selected temperature. It takes about maybe a half an hour or so to warm up to temperature, and then the proper burners kick in, and the whole process only takes about 3 hours or so. And then there's a cool down period before the cremains can be handled. And once the cool down period happens, then those are swept back out of the crematory or out of the retort, and they go into a cooling tray, and they're spread out and they cool for a while, and then they're placed into a processing unit. It's just a brown stainless steel processor that breaks those remains. And what you're talking about when it remains is the largest of the bones is what's left. That's really all that's left, and that's processed down to fine granules. And then that's what our cremains are.
Now, when someone is cremated, now you were talking about you turn it on, you let the
It's automatic after you turn it on. You just
Yeah.
set it. Yep.
right, but don't you so you remember me a year ago, 2 years ago, I was a pretty heavy fella.
Yep.
Your expertise in doing that
Mhm.
is you're going to put someone the size of me in there. You're going to that furnace is going to I'm going to call it a furnace oven, but it's going to be on. It's going to be on a little bit longer for someone who's 350 pounds and someone who's 110.
Actually, the opposite.
The opposite. Well,
What I just said was general, and there are two conditions when you don't just set it and forget it. One is someone that's 300 to 400 pounds.
like I was.
You actually only let it run for about 15 minutes, then you shut it off,
Why is that?
because you have enough body fat that you have enough fuel to keep burning without the flame being added an extra. If you let someone that's that big burn too hot, they can burn the crematory down. I've seen it happen. We had one that I worked at just before I started working there. It didn't burn to the ground, but pretty close. Burned the whole building around it and everything.
So it's a safety issue.
Oh yeah, you have to monitor somebody like that. Basically, you have to do that in stages. And the second thing is, unfortunately, and this happens too, is for infants. There's a special small pan, not a big box like we're talking about, and that's a much smaller, shorter time. That's the exact opposite. Um, so babies and real big people are different.
All right. So
Those have to be monitored. Yeah.
okay. So then after the it's done,
Mhm.
you got I guess you got a timer on it. Is it a timer?
Well, it has a built-in timer. Yeah.
Okay, so the timer goes off. You don't run over to the door and open it up. You got to wait a while.
Yeah.
It's like a kiln, I guess. I mean, it's going to
Well,
hold the heat.
you have a temperature gauge. You know how hot it is inside there, and basically it's half hour to warm up to temperature. Then it kicks in for full cremation. There's some afterburners and a main burner, and that gets up to around 1800 or so degrees. And then once that section, that cycle, I guess you say, is about 2.5 hours, if I remember right. It's been a while. And then cool down periods at least an hour, hour and a half, unless you're in a hurry. You can, you know, do it quicker, but it's warm and uncomfortable to do it.
So the process is done. Now now cools down.
Mhm.
Now, how do you take care? Now, there's nothing left. I mean, basically bones is all that's left.
Yeah,
All the
the
fat's
largest,
gone,
the large,
all
yeah,
the skin's gone. It's all burnt off.
mhm,
And it's gone to,
yep, it's
it's
vaporized.
burned just ashes. So now you have the bones in there. Now you're going to take the bones and you're going to grind the bones.
Well, the processor just pulverizes them down to a finer powder because you don't want it to look like bones. You don't want people to open the container and see something that looks like a fragmented bone. You just want it to be powder, especially if they're going to scatter the ashes. You want dust. You don't want chunks of bones to be scattered. That's not
Not cool.
aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. So, when we talked about this the other day when we were talking about what we were going to video, I said, what we need, what's it look like? And I
Mhm.
explained to you what it looked like. I says, does it look something like this?
Yeah,
you know?
it actually
Whoops.
does. It's not exactly like that, but it's stainless like that, round like that. And inside is a blade, heavy duty stainless steel blade, and it just,
And that is not bone
yep,
in there.
yep.
That's not bone in there, ladies and gentlemen. That is grain because I use
It's a
this.
lot deeper than that. That wouldn't hold all the
Oh, this holds about a cup of
yeah.
stuff in there. It's not very big. All right. So
This thing's
then
about 18 inches tall or so, something like
okay,
that.
this here,
About
if I
that
put
wide.
too much stuff in it, will bog down and stop. And it's got a fuse on it. So now you scrape out all the bones, you pulverize all the bones, you put all the bones together. Now, obviously, I got a shoulder replacement. You don't put the what do you do with the shoulder replacements?
There are certain things, you're right. Knees, shoulders, titanium plates in people's heads. Um, if they had a broken leg and have screws in there, if they're wearing clothes that have buttons on them that didn't cremate, all that has to be removed. And we have a magnet that we run over top of the cremains, and that magnet will remove everything that's iron or metallic. And if it's stainless steel or titanium or something like that, it will not. So you just have to physically sift through it and pull those out by hand. But yeah, those have to be removed. We don't process that stuff. That just gets discarded.
But like if Mike's shoulder, if I was to be cremated because you're not going to cut it out at the funeral home, it's going to get burnt up with me, right? My
Oh
shoulder.
yeah, we don't do surgery on that kind of stuff. We're not
Okay, but I
doctors.
know I was seeing something last night. I know you have to take a pacemaker out.
Right.
Um,
And there's a
and
biohazard box that we're required to put that kind of stuff in.
so if a family member come to you and said, Dad had two shoulder replacements and a hip replacement, but we want those back. Hey, have you ever had that happen?
Nope.
No, but
Nope. And I'll tell you one thing that I did ask a family, because I had a man that had a prosthetic, titanium. I think it was titanium. I don't think it was stainless steel. Which I didn't know they made prosthetics out of titanium, but it looked like a really fancy leg.
yeah, mine's titanium.
I mean, the whole leg, this guy's whole leg, and it had a shoe on it, And I know that thing had to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And
Yeah.
of course, they didn't want it back. So I called the local prosthetic place and see if I could make a donation and just give it to them. And even they wouldn't take this. We're not allowed to
Yeah.
reuse any
Yeah.
parts of it. So we ended
Yeah.
up just throwing that away. Yeah.
Considering what that would have cost, that's a shame.
Well, I'm sure what it cost to make, I don't know, but retail, I'm sure it cost the family thousands upon thousands.
Oh, I know a buddy of mine has got a prosthetic leg from the military, $30,000.
Oh my gosh.
His leg is $30,000, but he's got these electronic stuff in it. I mean, other than wiggling his toes, he can do a lot of stuff with it.
Okay.
This was part 1 of everything you wanted to know about cremation. Join us next week for part 2 as Rick and Randy finish answering Jay's question and bring you another installment of Rick's Oddities.
Don't you ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet, from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week, until your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose, they eat the jelly between your toes. A big hungry worm with a rolling eye crawls in your stomach and out your eye. Your stomach turns a slimy green, and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread it on a piece of bread, and that's what you eat when you are dead.